Hello, horror fans. Welcome back to Jay versus Horror. I'm your host, Jay Wall. And today, guys, we're talking about who our favorite actors of all time in the horror genre are. Check out the t shirt, guys. Just came in today. Jay versus Horror. Pretty proud of that. It was like $40. So I'm not trying to sell them to anybody because I don't, try to make money off you guys really. So if you want to buy one, I will give you the link to the distributor and you can pay them so there's no third party stuff. But anyway, yeah, we're talking about our favorite actors in horror history, and I chose Vincent Price. Of course, I chose Vincent Price. And it kind of sounds like a cop out, but it's really not because I really love Vincent Price. About 3 or 4 years ago, I did a top 10 list with a friend, top 10 Vincent Price films, and we went down our top 10 list, and I had to watch a lot of movies. I thought I'd seen a lot of Vincent Price horror films until we did this list, and I realized I had to watch about 20 films from Vincent Price to really know which ones were in the top 10. And when I was doing that, I really gained a new appreciation for him because when I was growing up in the 80s. Vincent Price kind of felt like your creepy uncle, your horror uncle. I wouldn't say creepy uncle, your horror uncle. Because every time Halloween rolled around or anything was mentioned about horror, you always saw like Vincent Price and Elvira, and he became like a staple in the genre. Like when you saw him, you associated him with the horror genre, and so that's kind of like the image I had of him. But going back and rewatching some of the Mask of the Red Death, which he is awesome in, and also my all-time favorite, Theater of Blood. I love that movie, and it's kind of an allegory for his own life because he was never taken seriously by critics even though he was a great actor and he probably could have pulled off any role he took or was offered anyway. And so, yeah, Theater of Blood is a lot of fun because in that he's a pissed off actor who's going around killing people. It's actually a pretty early slasher if you want to know the truth about it. Yeah. So I like that one a lot. I went with Vincent Price, and we had several comments from very knowledgeable people out there this time. And we're going to run down the list and we're going to talk a little bit about everybody's choices. Randy Spurlock, who's a pretty cool chick. She knows a lot about horror. She's one of our moderators in the J versus Horror group. She says, I got to go with Kurt Russell. He can do horror, action, comedy, westerns, and do them all well. McCready is my favorite horror role that he's ever done. And so, yeah, Kurt Russell is a good pick. I would agree with that. That's an awesome pick. Randy Spurlock also says Barbara Crampton. Barbara Crampton's been in a lot of horror films. I like Barbara Crampton. We sometimes, occasionally, she will talk to me on Twitter if I'm lucky that day. Janine Kraft says, even though Friday the 13th is my favorite horror movies, aside from the Jason character and who plays him, I would say, oh, okay, I see what she said. I would say Donald Pleasance, something about his calming presence or familiarity. Love his style of acting, hard to explain. Donald Pleasance is a great choice, right, guys? Donald Pleasance, a classically trained actor who just kind of ended up in Halloween. Weren't they trying to get, I can't remember if it was Peter Cushing or Christopher Lee they were trying to get to turn him down, and they ended up going with Donald Pleasance, and it worked out great. Our next comment comes from Pete Weaver. Pete says, Tim Curry, he can play anything. That's a great choice, right? Tim Curry. Awesome choice there. Yeah, man, I love Tim Curry. I think my favorite Tim Curry role, and I love him as Pennywise, but I like Alexander Skarsgård too. I think they both do a good job in their own right, their own interpretation of the role. But my favorite Tim Curry role is his performance as Wadsworth in Clue. I mean, he anchors that whole film, and it's got a huge cast, and just his physical performance in that movie, man. He's running around all over the place and falling down and doing this, and he's just perfect, you know. Leah McLean says Vincent Price, hands down, he was the master. Secondly, I would add Lon Chaney. Without his special effects makeup, where would we be today? That's a good point. Great pick there with Lon Chaney. Lex Teo says not enough people talk about Linnea Quigley. She was in a lot of 80s classics. I'll agree with that. Linnea Quigley was in a lot of 80s classics. Um, and she still looks great. She's one of those actresses that, you know, even though she's older now, she still looks great. Uh, Ryan Willicks says, gonna go with Christopher Lee by a nose over Peter Cushing. It's the fact that these classically trained actors were quite content churning out horror. His Dracula is my favorite, and I love that at a later point he stopped caring and just made the movies he wanted to make, like whatever, no matter how weird or niche. Yeah, that's a good point. Pat Weaver says, and also Vincent Price, of course. And then we had a couple big names here. Russell De Silva. Russell's like an international film critic. This guy has done interviews with Christian Bale and everybody under the sun. I see him on his Facebook page all the time, and he's interviewing these huge stars in Bollywood. Like, he's a big deal internationally, and I like Russell a lot. He's always got something cool to say. And here he says Robert Englund and Jamie Lee Curtis because both horror monsters and Final Girls are two of the most landmark tropes in the genre. And while the former is the only actor I feel who transcended the mask, so to speak, to become synonymous as a popular face in horror even among non-horror fans, the latter is hand down, in my opinion, the most iconic Final Girl ever. So yeah, couple great picks there you can make. And I always say, look, I love a lot of different horror franchises, but I don't think that there's a single actor out there that means more to his franchise than Robert Englund does. And you could argue like Doug Jones or Tony Todd, guys who don't wear masks because they have to give the performance, right? And even when they're in makeup, they have to give a performance, right? So yeah, I think Robert is probably the most important actor to a franchise in a long time. And that's why he's so hard to replace. And fans will probably never let anyone replace him unless they have a vote and somebody wins by like 70% or something. That's the only way they'll ever allow it. Wes Jones from Real Talk, a horror movie they're not a horror movie podcast. They're a movie podcast that occasionally talks about horror movies. And even though they're not a horror movie podcast, they're one of the better horror movie podcasts out there because when they do talk about horror movies, they know what the hell they're talking about. Real Talk, that's REEL, that's a pun. Real Talk movie podcast. Wesley Jones runs that, and he says it's tough, but I got to go with Bela Lugosi. Other than his obvious excellent role as Dracula, all of his other films, White Zombie, Devil Bat, etc., so many roles, he is legendary. And yeah, I have to agree with that too. Great choice there from Wes, Bela Lugosi. Leah McLaughlin says she has three she can't choose between: Kurt Russell, Bruce Campbell, and Rowdy Roddy Piper. Yeah, gotta love that, right? Rowdy wasn't in a whole lot of horror films, but he made a couple interesting films. Frogtown was pretty fun, and so was, of course, They Live. Dave Whitebridge says Brad Dourif. Yeah, I love Brad Dourif, and I love it when he just turns up and stuff because he wasn't always a huge actor, a huge name. So there's a lot of stuff he just kind of turns up in, like 1993's Trauma from Dario Argento. It's a weird film that Tom Savini did the effects to, where everybody gets their head cut off with this little machine. But Brad Dourif just shows up in the film for like 20 minutes. It's fun. Emily Dunlap, and I'm going to butcher this name. She says Edwig Finch, so gorgeous and amazing in all those giallos. Yes. And I know who you're talking about because I think now, in my opinion, I don't know. This seems like the character, the Love Witch, like they kind of based it off her look, off the look of Edwiggy or Wiggy or whatever, Finch. Yeah, from all those old giallo films. Angela Louise Lopez Garcia says Kurt Russell, Tim Robbins, Anthony Hopkins, Denzel Washington, Dennis Hopper, Nick Cage. Sorry, couldn't pick just one. Ha ha ha. I love cinema. That's true. It's like, okay, when you're asking who is the best actor in horror movie history, do you throw in Jack Nicholson or do you want to pick guys who are iconic in the genre and have made like, 4, 5, 6 horror movies or more? Or do you want to pick, you could say like Marlon Brando was in the Island of Dr. Moreau. I mean, there's a lot of actors who just kind of show up in horror every now and then. Willem Dafoe would be another one where you could say he was the greatest actor of all time to ever be in a horror film. Jack Nicholson, of course. There's tons of them. Dustin Hoffman was in Marathon Man, which is not technically a horror film, but close. And John Travolta in Blowout. And there's a ton of, like pretty good, great actors who have been, even Tom Hanks was in He Knows You're Alone, right? So if you want to go that route, it gets really murky. So the way I went with choosing Vincent Price as my favorite is somebody who's made quite a few, films in the horror genre. So it's not just one or one appearance or two appearances. Otherwise, I don't know. I might go with Nicolas Cage. I like Mandy a lot, man. That performance. I know a lot of people think it's cheesy, but I like it a lot. George Rogers says Robert Englund. He always looks like he's having a blast in every horror movie and show he's in. That's true. And Robert has done a lot of other horror movies over the years since Nightmare on Elm Street ended. Joe Cordiero says Robert Englund is Freddy. Loved the character and his wit. So Freddy would probably, along with Vincent Price, Robert Englund and Vincent Price are kind of killing it right now. Dave Becker, Dr. Shock, Dave Becker from DVD Infatuation, Considering the Cinema, Land of the Creeps. Dave is like one of the best horror content guys out there. He won the Silver Bolo Award last year from Joe Bob for being a great horror content creator. And Dave says, mine is The Man You Have Pictured, Vincent Price. He was excellent in The House on Haunted Hill. Yeah, great movie. I can't believe I forgot to mention that. And movies like Dr. Phibes, actually not one of my favorites from Vincent Price. And the Corman Poe films, like I talked about, Mask of the Red Death. He had charisma to spare. Runner-up is Dracula himself, Bela Lugosi. I think Karloff was the better actor overall, but even in all the crappy movies Lugosi made, he gave it his all. Great comment there from Dr. Shock, Dave Becker. Check out Dr. Shock at Land of the Creeps podcast, DVD Infatuation, Considering the Cinema, the horror movie podcast, all that stuff. Dr. Shock is a icon in the horror content creation department. Next up, we have Terry Vance. Terry Vance says, Vincent Price, such a great actor. He had great charm and appeal. And Aaron Flamett says, this is live. Yeah, it's live. Two Fallon says, hello, glad to see you. Jack Nicholson is my favorite, The Shining and Wolf. Yeah, we talked about that. I had kind of forgot about Wolf. I like that one with him and James Spader, Michelle Pfeiffer. Marsha Palushek says, going to be honest, this is hard for me. There are so many good ones. I like Karloff, Chaney, and Price, who paved the way for actors like Englund and Henriksen. Yeah, I love Lance Henriksen too. Man, I have a great story about Lance Henriksen. Can't remember the year exactly, but it was Fright Fest in Texas. It was like 14, 15, 16, something like that. And I had a bum knee. I was bummed out because I had a bad knee. I had got to the convention center, and that day my knee went out on me. I don't even remember what happened, if I took a bad step or what, but my knee went out on me. And so I'm having to take the elevator down. I went into the hotel, and I had to take the elevator down one floor instead of walking down the steps like a normal person my age. And I'm kind of like, hobbling, and I get on the elevator, and I'm a little bummed out. And all of a sudden I see somebody stick their hand in, and like the door comes back open, and in walks Lance Henriksen. And he's like, hey, and he's like, it's good to see I'm not the only person who has to take the elevator one floor. So, yeah, I mean, he looked like he was still in great shape to me, but yeah, made my day actually, because I was having a really bad day before that. Because, you don't want to go to you go to these conventions, you want to go around and check everything out. You don't want to be hobbled like weird. And I didn't have crutches or anything like that with me, or a knee brace or anything. So, yeah. BJ Drive says, hi, got to push for Peter Cushing on this. Refined perfection. Good pick. Aaron Flamett says, I love Christopher Lee. So there we go. Couple for Christopher Lee. And here we go again. Kevin Pishkin. We got another one for Bela Lugosi. He says, number one all time. He is iconic and truly embodied being Dracula. His life was amazingly tragic. He was a heroin addict and literally went insane before his death. In his last wishes, he was buried in the Dracula outfit. Yeah, I think I remember all that from Ed Wood. If you guys haven't seen Ed Wood, check that out. It tells a detailed story of Bela Lugosi, like a broader picture of him than anyone's ever seen, I think. Don Annelli, and Don is a pretty cool guy. Don runs a group that's kind of like a collective of horror minds. They have like a bunch of people inside of a community that do horror stuff and podcasts, all kinds of stuff. So check out Don Annelli if you get a chance. He says, my Mount Rushmore of horror actors are Price, Cushing, Karloff, Lee. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I think most people would agree with that. Demented Pictures says, good evening, Demented Pictures. Aaron Flamett says, Lon Chaney Jr. was good. Yeah, we had a couple mentions for Lon Chaney. Next, we're going with Kevin Patterson. And Kevin Patterson says, wow, that's a hard one. I think I'd go for Bruce Campbell. He's just so good in the Evil Dead series of movies and the TV show. You also have My Name is Bruce, Bubba Hotep, and Maniac Cop. I never get tired of watching him, so it's Bruce Campbell for me. Yeah, that's a great pick, Bruce Campbell. I really like Bubba Hotep. What an underrated movie, right? Nobody ever talks about Bubba Hotep, and I'm sad that they never made Bubba Nosferatu, which was going to be the sequel to that. Uh, Aaron Fleming over here says Max Shrek as Nosferatu. That's a great pick. Dominic Picture says Vincent Price. And yeah, Aaron says, hoping your week went well. Week did go well, man. I got my J versus Horror t-shirt in. Yeah, things are going well at the old J Wall Hacienda. Bo Ransdale. Bo did a show with me about a week ago, man. We had a great time. We did top 10 animal attacks or animal attack films. And yeah, that's here on the channel. We had a great time with that. Bo says Kurt Russell could go from everyman hero to villain in performances that span almost half a century. Yeah, Kurt Russell's getting a lot of love tonight. And Bo runs the Legion podcast. I can't remember what it's called, Legion Podcast something, but it's a collective of podcasters. And yeah, it's pretty awesome. Check it out. Dave James Parker, Mr. Parker, right here on YouTube. Mr. Parker does a show every Wednesday that's pretty damn awesome. He's one of the best reviewers out there, and he's been doing it for like 12 or 15 years right here on YouTube. So, yeah, much love to David James Parker, also known as Mr. Parker. He says, we talking only horror? That is super tough. I don't think I can pick one horror actor, but it would be one of the classic guys like Price, Lee, or Cushing. James McFetters. James McFetters runs a podcast called Evil Jelly, and I love Evil Jelly. It's a lot of fun. Those guys are fantastic. They have a really great atmosphere. Like you can just tell they're having fun while they're talking, so it's fun to listen. James McFetters says he may not be the best actor, but I will always love Bill Paxton's characters, Hudson, Severin, and Father Meeks from Frailty. Just to name a few. Rest in peace. Yeah, Bill Paxton, great actor, great performances in a lot of 80s horror films, right? We love Bill Paxton. We miss him a lot. You know, there's no telling how many more great movies he would have made. Chris Chamley is our last comment on here. So we went through 34 comments. And Chris Chamley says, Tom Atkins and Keith David are both actors that seem to be in every movie I like, multiple genres. Yeah, let's give some love to Keith David. And don't forget, like... there's always the question of Keith David versus David Keith, right? David Keith is the white guy. Keith David is the black guy. David Keith was in like Firestarter and a few other films from the 80s. And Keith David was in everything. He was in The Thing. He was in They Live, all the great John Carpenter films. I love Keith David, man. Even like he's such a great villain sometimes. He was great in Pitch Black. He was a great villain in Requiem for a Dream. Just the way he laughed like creeped me out, you know. So great actors there and great picks. Of course, Tom Atkins is a great pick. He saves basically any 80s movie he's in, right? And so, yeah, that's what we had for tonight, guys. Who was your favorite? Who was your choice for your favorite horror actor of all time? Who do you think is the best? Who do you think is the man? And so we had 34 comments on here. I'm going to read the last few that we have here live, and then we'll get off here and let you guys get back to what you were doing. Aaron said he loved Christopher Lee. I think we covered that. Yeah. Demented Picture said Vincent Price. Oh, yeah. Jeffrey Combs in Reanimator. That's a great pick from Aaron. And I love Jeffrey Combs in Reanimator, but I also love him. I love him more, I think, as Edgar Allan Poe. If you ever get a chance, watch the Masters of Horror episode, The Black Cat, where he plays Edgar Allan Poe. It's kind of a mashup of a few different Poe stories and then a little something extra in it. And Jeffrey Combs does a great job in that. He also does a great job. He does like a stage performance, like a Broadway show where he plays Poe and does really great at that. So, yeah, there we go, guys. Chu Fallon got one last one in. Christian Slater and Heathers. Yeah, I like Christian Slater. You know, Christian Slater always kind of reminded me of Jack Nicholson. I thought he would have been pretty good in a remake of The Shining if they had to remake The Shining, which they did in 1997, I want to say, with Steven Weber and Rebecca De Mornay. Rebecca De Mornay was an upgrade, and Steven Weber was a major downgrade. So that's how that film went. All right, horror fans, that's all we have for today. We love you. Don't forget to check our Patreon page, and don't forget to like and subscribe, guys. And we will talk to you as always next time. We got something we're talking about. Bye.